All right. Good morning, everyone. I am Jason, and it is Saturday, December 20th, 2025. It is 10:03 a.m. here in South Korea, and I am Jason. And today, I'm going to present to you guys this framework idea that I've been playing around with for a couple months, and I decided to finally create an actual presentation to go over the details and um, other things related to this idea. So this is gonna kind of be like a lecture, I guess you could say. I'm gonna be reading from my narration notes, so I won't really be able to. I'm gonna try to respond in the comments, but I'm gonna be trying to focus on reading off of my notes. So let's begin. Welcome to NeoState. In this lecture, we're going to explore a system engineer blueprint for building legally compliant digital first micro cities within the United States. NeoState is not a fictional idea, and it's not an attempt to create sovereignty outside the law. Instead, it is highly structured framework that brings together five major disciplines: governance engineering, digital identity systems, legal architecture, urban planning, and multi decade economic modeling. What we're building here is an open source model, a replicable governance framework that any community, organization, or research group can adopt or adapt. This means NeoState is intentionally designed to be transparent, academically grounded, and accessible so other communities can build their own internal governance systems responsibly. Every component in this presentation is rooted in real U.S. legal pathways, established institutional precedents, and best practices drawn from systems engineering, civic technology, and international high density urban development. This deck represents version 1 of the NeoState framework, a foundational concept meant to educate, inform, and empower people who want to understand how microcities can operate both digitally and physically while remaining fully compliant with U.S. law and aligned with long term economic sustainability. Whether you're a member of the Leopard Society, a researcher, a policymaker, or someone curious about building future ready communities, this presentation lays the groundwork for a model that is academically rigorous, legally sound, and practically in implementable. All right, let me quickly adjust. Like I said, if you join in, thank you all. I'm gonna be reading. Uh, so we got it's 32 slides, just to give you a heads up. But all right, next slide. All right, so my name is Jason Vaughn Holmes. My background begins in the United States Air Force, where I served for 15 years in civil engineering, specifically as a 3E5X1 engineering assistant. The role fundamentally shaped how I think about complex systems, infrastructure, compliance, and real world engineering constraints. I worked on surveying, drafting, construction oversight, and engineering coordination at a level where failure is not an option. Skills that directly inform NeoState. Professionally, I've also worked in contracting with the Army Corps of Engineers and U.S. Air Force Korea, where I advise on pre-construction, REAs, federal compliance, stakeholder alignment, and engineering review. That experience forced me to deeply understand federal contracting laws, FARs, risk allocation, and organizational decision making, critical components of designing governance. So, I'm also an entrepreneur and co founder of Leopard Society with ongoing academic work in computer science and planned graduate studies in systems engineering at a master's and PhD's level. I am a father and American living in South Korea. All of these layers influence NeoState because what I am building is not theoretical, it's informed by lived experience across government systems, international environments, digital technology, and community building. So, one of the core problems NeoState addresses is fragmentation. Communities today operate across uncoordinated systems. Some use Discord, some use group chats, and some have informal rules. But very few have legal and organizational coherence. This fragmentation makes it impossible to scale, govern disputes, enforce accountability, or plan long term. Governments and cities are also struggling. Urban planning are often lags behind demographic change, economic coordinations, and technology advancements. Many cities face affordability crises, infrastructure failures, underfunded services, and failing local governance systems. Most importantly, communities lack frameworks that integrate legal protections, digital infrastructure, internal governance, and sustainable economic systems. NeoState solves this by treating communities not as ad hoc groups, but as engineered systems built for resilience, clarity, and long term stability. So, NeoState functions as a system of systems. Each layer has a precise function and legal identity. The PMA forms the Private Institution Foundation, and PMA is Private Members Association. The 501c3 manages public facing educational and civic work. The holding company manages commercial operations. The subsidiary companies manage utilities, housing, transportation, and essential infrastructure. Then we add the digital governance layer, identity, treasury, rule enforcement, member rights, and digital courts. The digital layer acts as the connected tissue across the entire framework. Finally, urban and physical systems provide the real world environment communities need to thrive. The power of this model is not in any single element, it's in how elements interop to create a legal compliant, economically stable technology model, a technology modern microcity. The PMA is the sovereign interior of NeoState through sovereign in the private legal sense, not in the geopolitical sense. PMAs have existed in the US for generations. Religious orders, fraternity organizations, private clubs, and mutual benefit associations all operate under the same legal principles. Within a PMA, members voluntarily agree to internal rules and internal governance mechanisms. This allows the creation of internal tribunals, codes of conduct, voting mechanisms, and member rights frameworks. It is one of the only legal structures in the US that allows a group to govern itself internally without state interference, as long as activities remain private. For NeoState, the PMA forms the constitutional layer. It enables internal governance, disputes resolutions, digital identity verification, and the rule architecture that keeps the entire system coherent. So the 501c3 layer is essential because NeoState is not intended to be a closed or isolated community. It must engage with the world, academics, researchers, policymakers, donors, and the public. A nonprofit provides the legal pathway to operate in the public spaces, receive funding, form partnerships, and run civic tech or educational programs. This separation protects the PMA's integrity. The public facing nonprofit cannot run PMA governance, tribunals, or private membership affairs, but it can conduct research, create educational materials, host conferences, run open source civic software programs, and partner with universities. The dual structure, private PMA paired with a public nonprofit, is the backbone of many long-standing institutions in the US, from churches to fraternities to universities. A microcity cannot survive without an economic engine. The holding company is the financial backbone responsible for revenue, commercial partnerships, utilities, rental operations, and long term economic health. This structure mirrors the municipal corporation model used by large scale community developments and city owned utility companies. By centralizing commercial operations, the holding company ensures transparent accounting, tax compliance, and internal financial governance. It also limits liability and operational risk. Importantly, the holding company reinvests in the community, funding infrastructure, technology, and long term development. This separation, private PMA, nonprofit 501c3, and commercial holding company, is what makes NeoState legally stable, scalable, and economically resilient. Cities work because public services work. Water systems, power grids, waste management, housing authorities, school systems, these are not optional parts of a community. They are its organs. Neil State adopts Neil State adopts municipalization model where each service operates as a subsidiary entity. This ensures pricing accuracy, service level accountability, clear financial management, and regulatory compliance. It also allows members or residents to interact with services in a structural, predictable way. Subsidies can hire Subsidiaries can hire staff, sign contracts, and operate within the holding company's governance system. This creates a micro city that runs like a well governed municipal district, but with modern design and complete internal coherence. So, when the Neil State architecture, within the Neil State architecture, internal tribunals serve as the cornerstone of self governance. They operate under the legal authority of the PMA, which means members voluntarily consent via contract to participate in internal judicial processes. This is not about creating a parallel legal system. Instead, it's structurally similar to established arbitration systems, churches tribunals, union boards, and other long-standing private justice mechanisms recognized under U.S. law. These tribunals are designed with due process in mind. Members receive notice of complaints, the right to respond, and access to clearly defined procedures. The system emphasizes proportionality, transparency, and retroactive paths wherever possible. This promotes community stability, reduces conflict, escalation, and reinforces the culture and norms that guide the Neil State community. A critical systems engineering advantage of internal tribunals that they create a feedback loop because a feedback loop between member behavior, community values, and governance policy. Decision patterns and disputes all become inputs to the governance refinement process. This means Neil State is not only governed, it is learning. The tribunal system becomes a living instrument of institutional adaptation. So, Neil State's legal architecture is intentionally designed to fit squarely within U.S. legal norms. I see there's a lot of Korean people here. Maybe I could do one on Korea, but this one is mainly focused on the U.S. for right now. So every component, the PMA, the 501c3, the holding company, and subsidiaries mirrors a structure that already exists in thousands of organizations across the United States. We're not introducing new sovereignty. We are using well-established legal pathways that provide autonomy, flexibility, and institutional legitimacy. Private membership associations derive their authority from the First Amendment freedom of association and from contract law. As long as activities remain private and do not violate public policies, PMAs maintain broad discretion over internal rules, governance, and disputes resolution. This is the same legal foundation that empowers churches, fraternity organizations, HOAs, and private clubs. By keeping public benefit activities in the 501c3 and commercial activities within for profit entities, NeoState follows a compliance model that agencies, courts, and philanthropic institutions recognize. This separation protects the community, preserves funding, eligibility, and ensures long term operational stability. The digital identity layer is the gateway to NeoState governance ecosystem. Every member receives a cryptographically verifiable identity that connects them to rights, responsibilities, and governance entitlements defined in the PMA. This identity is not designed to replace government ID. It supplements it by providing a secure internal civic identity for community level operations. Digital identity enables control access to services, vote. Oh, wait. Give me a moment. All right. Boom. That's better. All right. Boom. All right. We're back rocking and rolling. All right. Where did I left off? All right. Digital identities enables control access to services, voting on proposals, participating in internal. Let's do something real quick. Okay. All right. Digital identity enables control access to services, voting on proposals, participating in internal tribunals, assessing educational programs, contributing to research, and even engaging in economic transactions within the NeoState ecosystem. This gives members a structured way to interact with the community in a fully digital first environment. From a system engineering standpoint, the zero trust architecture ensures that every interaction is authorized, authenticated, and auditable. This creates a transparent internal governance system where no action is assumed safe by default. The combination of privacy, preservation, and strong authentication builds institutional trust and long term resilience. The Web3 treasury is an accountability engine. Rather than relying on opaque bookkeeping or informal decision making, NeoState uses blockchain based accounting to ensure every budget allocation, grant distribution, and internal payment is transparent and traceable. This enables a higher standard of governance than most nonprofits or municipalities operate under today. The DAO layer doesn't replace leadership, it enhances legitimacy. Members participate in structured governance processes where major financial decisions, constitutional amendments, and long term planning are put through a digital mechanism. This strengthens member engagement while ensuring the PMA's internal constitution remains the anchor for all operations. From a technical perspective, smart contracts allow NeoState to enforce financial rules automatically. This reduces administration overhead, prevents misuse of funds, and ensures compliance with both internal standards and external legal requirements. Over time, this system becomes a form of institutional memory, codifying financial governance into automated protocols. The member registry serves as the institutional backbone of the NeoState governance system. It functions as the community census, rights registry, and eligibility ledger. This registry is what allows the PMA to administer internal laws, resolve conflicts, and define participation thresholds for voting or community service. Because the registry is a cryptographical secure, it prevents unauthorized access and ensures that every internal court ruling or governance decision is applied only to verified members who have agreed to the PMA's terms. This is a critical legal requirement. Internal governance is only valid for consenting members. Let me say that again. Internal governance is only valid for consenting members. From a systems engineering standpoint, the registry ensures traceability, consistency, and reliability in decision making. It unifies demographic, legal, and governance data into a single authoritative source. This strengthens both the institutional integrity and long term scalability. Oh, hello to everyone that's jumped in. Thank you. I do see a lot of you are Korean, and I apologize. Um, Hopefully, this framework that I'm going over in this lecture is mainly focused on U.S. based communities because it's focused on U.S. laws or whatever. But if you can understand my English and you find this interesting, please comment, and I'll try to read comments later. I guess in the meantime, if you're trying to practice English, I guess listening to me read in English could be a benefit. I hope so. Other than that, thank you for jumping in. Make sure you hit the hearts, please. Like I said, hit hearts, comment, follow, and let me get back to reading. All right. So, NeoState treats data not as an asset to exploit, but as a governance responsibility. Our data policy is rooted in zero trust model, meaning every request for access must be authenticated, authorized, and logged. This ensures internal safety and maintains trust between members and administrators. We establish strict retention policies, minimizing unnecessary data storage to reduce risk. Access privileges are tied to member roles, and sensitive information remains compartmentalized. The system is designed to align with U.S. data protection frameworks, including privacy laws, cybersecurity best practices, and nonprofit compliance obligations. As a governance institution, NeoState must model responsible digital citizenship. Data transparency and ethical stewardship become core components of legitimacy. The system engineer's perspective ensures that policy, technology, and member behavior align into a coherent data governance ecosystem. So, by making NeoState open source, we are creating an institutional blueprint that any community can adopt, modify, or extend. This democratizes access to high quality governance tools and invites collaboration from researchers, policymakers, engineers, and social innovators. Open source governance increases intellectual legitimacy. It allows external experts to audit the structure. It validates assumptions and proposes improvements. This ensures that NeoState evolves through community driven innovation rather than isolated decision making. In the long term, the open source model transfers NeoState into a research platform. Universities, think tanks, urban planners, and economists can all use the system as a foundation for studying governance, urbanization, and digital society. This positions NeoState not just as a community, but as a contributor to civic innovation on a national and global scale. A micro city requires an economic engine. You need money. It's simple as that. You need money. um, A micro city requires an economic engine that can survive leadership changes, demographic shifts. Just I'm gonna pause real quick. So the reason why I think this is very important for those, if you're following like the news in the U.S. right now, there's a number of cities and states that are facing budget shortfalls. Chicago is looking at $1 billion shortfall in the coming year. My home city, New Orleans, where they're looking at a shortfall of like $220 million. And partly these bad practices in the states, my home country, the U.S., where we see people in office, they're just doing horrible jobs at governing these cities and states that they have been put in charge of. They're supposed to be good stewards, but clearly they have failed. So the whole point of NeoState grew out of modernizing policy tools and governance tools to eliminate these shortfall, these budget deficits and stuff that are created from lack of foresight and understanding of how money works for a city and a state, right? So I just want to deviate a little bit from my lecture notes, but now let's get back. A micro city requires an economic engine that can survive leadership changes, demographic shifts, and external shocks. NeoState's multi-decade economic model allows us to forecast financial stability over 5, 10, 30, and even 50-year cycles. The level of long-term planning is rare in communities, but essential for institutional longevity. Our approach includes revenue diversification through utilities, housing, digital services, research funding, and commercial activities. The goal is to create a self-sustaining ecosystem where the community prosperity does not depend on a single external source. From a system engineering standpoint, these models incorporate demographic data, infrastructure costs, service economies, and internal labor flows. By stress testing various economic scenarios, NeoState ensures resilience across multiple future pathways, making it a community built not just for present but for generations. In a microcity framework, sustainability is not an abstract concept. It is a measurable engineering requirement. No, NeoState treats the economy as an integrated subsystem composed of multiple revenue engines, each model for reliability, predictability, and low volatility. This means the community financial stability does not hinge on a single industry or trend. Our approach mirrors most municipal finance, where cities rely on diversified revenue, utilities, housing, transportation services, and commercial activity. However, NeoState improves upon this by aligning economic engines directly with member needs. Housing revenues fund housing upgrades, utility revenues fund infrastructure resilience, and service related revenues support workforce and community programs. This design ensures that NeoState can sustain itself through each population phase: digital community, first, physical hub, and a micro city scale. The system is engineered to withstand market cycles, demographic fluctuations, and technological changes. The goal is a financial architecture that remains stable at 5 years, robust at 10 years, and predictable at 30 and 50 years. This is how communities survive and thrive over generations. Micro city budgeting is fundamentally different from traditional nonprofit or corporate budgeting. We borrow heavily from municipal finance, where every dollar must be allocated with long term public impact in mind. The NeoState model introduces structured budget categories: infrastructure development, community services, economic reserves, emergency funds, and reinvestment pools. Transparency is a core principle. Every revenue engine is tied to a specific budget responsibility, meaning transportation revenues are reinvested into mobility systems. Housing income supports housing maintenance and expansion. Education funding flows back into human capital development. This mirrors strong urban governance systems as Seoul's, shout out to Seoul, districts budgeting, or Singapore's long range infrastructural planning. Most importantly, the budget is designed to scale with population growth. Whether NeoState serves 200 members or 20,000, the budgeting framework remains stable. That this kind of engineered predictability is what gives micro cities longevity and credibility. One of NeoState's core innovations is how it balances private ownership with community owned infrastructure. Members retain full rights to personal property, homes, retail, shops, intellectual property, and entrepreneurial ventures. This ensures that NeoState aligns with the U.S. Constitution's values and supports wealth building for families. At the same time, community owned assets such as utilities, common spaces, administrative facilities, and core service infrastructure remain under NeoState management. This hybrid model is similar to how Singapore manages public housing and how Korean districts operate shared services. It creates a stable foundation while preventing predatory land speculation or fragmentation of essential city functions. This combination of private ownership and community stewardship produces a resilient governance environment. It allows individuals to prosper while maintaining long term clarity in how the micro city evolves, expands, and sustains itself. A micro city must cultivate an economic environment where members can thrive. NeoState accomplished this by designing its internal market using principles from economics, behavioral policy, and system engineering. The system, oh, where we at? Okay, good. The system rewards entrepreneurship, innovation, education, and essential services provision. Rules are designed for transparency and fairness. Market market such as monopolies or um, uh, um, shoot, my bad. Market all right, restart. So markets such as monopolies or extractive pricing are prevented through clear governance structures enforced by NeoState legal architecture. Economic incentives are modeled using data from successful urban ecosystems like Seoul, which rewards small business density, and Singapore, which links economic incentives to long term community development. The goal is mobility, economic mobility, social mobility, and mobility of opportunity. Members should feel that the longer they remain part of NeoState, the more their skills, investments, and contributions translates to meaningful returns. This is what makes a community not only functional but aspirational. South Korea urban South Korea's urban planning is among the most efficient in the world. Land is used intentionally. Its walkability is high. Transit network transit networks are integrated, and mixed use zoning produces vibrant communities. These principles translate exponentially well to microcity design inside the United States. NeoState adapts Korean high density planning, narrow footprint, vertical development, mixed use districts, and community centered design to produce physically compact yet highly livable communities. This model increases social interaction, reduces infrastructure costs, supports local commerce, and enhances safety. It is also far more sustainable than suburban sprawl. The key insight is that density is not the enemy, poor planning is. I'm say that again. The key insight is that density is not the enemy, poor planning is. When density is applied with system precision, it becomes the backbone of economic efficiency cohesion. NeoState physical model embraces these lessons directly. In NeoState, housing is designed as part of a larger ecosystem rather than a standalone product. Vertical development reduces land requirements, improves cost efficiency, and creates natural human clustering. Similar to Korean apartment districts or Japanese mixed use zones, commercial and civic spaces are placed strategically to support walkability, social life, and economic opportunity. This design also supports operational efficiency. Emergency services, transportation, utilities, and commercial services all function better when the community is compact and layered. Mixed use zones, where residents live, shop, work, and gather, create the sense of community that suburban planning often lacks. NeoState treats housing as a systems engineering artifact, flexible, modular, scalable, and optimized for both quality of life and cost stability. This creates a built environment that matures with the community rather than degrading over time. A microcity must prioritize safety, not as a reactive function, but as a systems design requirement. Neo-state models includes police, fire, emergency response, and public safety infrastructure designed according to municipal best practices, but operated under the microcities governance framework. We look to models like Seoul, which integrates CCTV networks, digital monitoring systems, community patrols, and emergency response infrastructure into a seamless whole. However, NeoState adds an additional layer, balancing security with privacy. Our system is designed to give members transparency and agency in how safety's data is used. Emergency services are engineered around speed, clarity, and interoperability. In a micro city environment, the proximity of housing, commercial space, and community services means response times can be significantly reduced, strengthening resilience and quality of life. Transportation and utilities are the arteries of a functioning city. NeoState designs these systems as interoperable networks engineered for maximal reliability, micromobility, walkability, and internal shuttle systems form the transportation backbone. This reduces the need for heavy vehicle infrastructure and lowers operational costs. On the utility side, water, power, waste, communication, each becomes a subsidiary responsible for maintenance, upgrades, and service pricing. This this monetization through enterprise model is inspired by how small European cities and some Korean districts operate their public services with high efficiency. The result is a city where every subsystem supports the others. Transportation strengthens commerce, utilities strengthen housing, housing strengthens community life, and community life strengthens governance. This is a systems engineered applied to urban functionality. Phase zero is where every modern city truly begins, not with land, not with buildings, but with a digital community capable of governing itself. In system engineering, this is the equivalent of building the baseline architecture independent of physical deployment. At this stage, the focus is on cultural formation, establishing shared values, defining the mission, and creating a governance framework people can actually function in. We also treat this as the low cost prototyping environment. Digital governance, identity systems, and decision making processes can be tested and refined at almost zero marginal cost. This prevents expensive errors later. The digital first approach is exactly how Estonia built the foundation for one of the most advanced digital governments in the world. Neil State follows the same principle: build digitally, validate socially, then scale physically. Build digitally, validate socially, then scale physically. Say it again for the third time. Build digitally,
validate socially, then scale physically. During phase zero, membership roles, early leadership structures, working groups, and the first version of the Constitution emerged. Digital tools, DAO platforms, digital IDs, communication channels all serve as the sandbox for institutional behavior. If a community cannot govern itself online, it is not ready to govern land. If a community cannot govern itself online, it is not ready to govern land. If a community is not able to govern online, it is not ready to govern on land. Phase 1 formalizes the legal skeleton of NeoState. Here, the PMA becomes the core judicial space where internal governance, member agreements, dispute resolution, and community protection take place. Legally, this is the engine that gives NeoState the ability to self govern without violating U.S. sovereignty or constitutional norms. The 501c3 is then layered as the public interface, grant eligibility, education, open source governance research, community programs. Beneath it sits the holding company, which becomes the legal compliant vehicle for revenue generation, commercial activity, and municipal like services. This tri layer architecture mirrors established U.S. models used by unions, religious organizations, academic institutions, and some nonprofit smart city testbeds. Phase 1 is where NeoState becomes a recognized entity with boundaries, processes, documentation, and standards. It is the point where governance moves from community norms to structured systems grounded in U.S. law and systems engineering principles. Phase 2 represents the transition from digital governance to physical co-location. This does not require hundreds of acres of land or a full micro city. In fact, the first physical hub can be a small and even an office suite, a multi-use building, a cluster of co-living units, or a hybrid headquarters. The purpose of this phase is not scale, it is proof of concept. This phase allows us to test the municipal subsidiary model in practice. Housing operations, safety protocols, shared utilities, community programs, and early commercial activities. Many successful governance experiments, from private campus developments to charter community pilots, began with modest physical footprints, often under 5 acres. Phase 2 is also crucial for cultural formation. Systems behave differently when physical space shared routines and daily interactions are introduced. This phase produces the real world data needed to refine the future 100 and 1,000 acres model. Phase 3 is where Neil State transitions into a fully functional micro city ecosystem. At this stage, governance, economy, urban systems must operate as a cohesive whole. What system engineering calls a fully integrated system of system deployment. The digital identity layer aligns with the physical residence system. Municipal subsidiaries mature into full operational departments: housing, power, safety, transportation, education, and commerce. This phase is where the soul style density principles come to life. Walkable blocks, mixed use zoning, shared infrastructure, and vertically integrated land use. Unlike traditional U.S. suburban sprawl, Neil State uses a compact, efficient footprint that lowers costs, increases community cohesion, and improves sustainability. The microcity model becomes economically viable here because density creates efficiency. Shared services, high occupancy rates, and coordinated governance produce a stable long term revenue base essential for decades long planning cycles. So, phase 4 is where NeoState becomes larger than a single location. The goal is not merely to build one microcity, but to make the entire framework open source so other groups, cultural communities, religious groups, professional networks, or diaspora communities can adopt and adapt the model. This creates a network of interconnected microcities, each operating independently but sharing standards, digital tools, legal architecture, and economic frameworks. It's a federated model similar to how credit unions, co-ops, or religious religious institutions operate across multiple states while maintaining autonomy. Replication is not expansion for its own sake. It is strategic diffusion. By making NeoStake a public good, the governance framework becomes a durable, evolving institution shaped by multiple communities rather than dependent or a single founder. What makes NeoState viable is that every component is grounded in real precedents, legally, economically, technologically, and urbanistically. None of these is theoretical speculation. The U.S. already recognizes private justice, nonprofits, corporate municipalities, and identity systems. Cities like Singapore and districts in Seoul have demonstrated the efficiency of high density microurbanization. Digital governance models from Estonia ID systems to Web3 DAOs have proven has proven the legitimacy of digital first institutions. NeoState simply integrates these pieces into one coherent system. From a systems engineer perspective, it is the natural next step in civic evolution, a modular, adaptive, multi layer operating system for communities. My invention to both my invitation to both the Leopard Society members and external communities is simple. Participate whether you're skilled in policy, engineering, software development, law, construction, economics, urban planning. There is a place for you in shaping this framework. NeoState is not a closed project, it is a public mission. The more minds we bring in, the stronger and more resilient the system becomes. By contributing your expertise, your critical thinking, and your lived experience, you help build a governance model that can support real people, real families, and real futures. So, um, forgot to put my link. My link is in my bio. I forgot to put that in the slide. Thank you for taking the time to explore the NeoState Micro City Framework. The next steps are collaborative, reviewing the documents, participating in workshops, helping build the digital governance tools, and supporting the open source release. This project is larger than any individual. It represents a multi-decade effort to rethink how communities function, how governance is designed, and how people build meaningfully stable, prosperous environments. I appreciate your time, your attention, and your willingness to imagine something different. Mm-mm-mm. Okay. All right.